technologies alone and go ahead. So to give some introduction to the students, as we know already, we are more than 1.3 billion population, and expected to, the population is expected to increase to about 1.7 billion by 2050. The rate of genetic gain in yield, that is every year how much yield we are adding to the genetic potential of the crop, is currently about 1% for major food crops. So this needs to be made to 2.5% if you have to meet the food grain demand for the 2050. So the conventional approaches is successful, but it is time consuming. So at the faster rate, if you want to improve the crop production, we have to use omics technologies. Besides that, India is uh, a malnourished country, we can say. About 60% of the macro and micronutrients are severely shortfall, and many of our people are not getting the whole nutrition. Besides that, there is a dwindling natural resources, that is fresh water is decreasing, land is decreasing, and the climate change is challenging us. In all these challenges, we have to meet the sustainable developmental goal. These are the 17 goals we have to meet by 2030. Our country is making all the efforts. So the sustainable goal 2 is zero hunger, that is agriculture scientists and farmers have to contribute for that. So these are some of the key timelines in the plant breeding technologies that has evolved. So of late in the maybe in the 21st century, these omic technologies have come in, and they are making significant contribution to the crop improvement. So today, first we will talk about the phenomics. Although you might have heard about all the other omics, today we will talk about phenomics. So although the term phenomics is very new, phenomics is nothing but a collection of information of the phenotype of the whole organism throughout its life cycle. So the phenotyping is not new to the human being. So it is was first used in the domestication. That is, it is a prerequisite for the domestication. Maybe this is the first scientific method, that is phenotyping is the first method they might have used for selecting the best performing genotype and use it for the cultivation. And then when the systematic crop improvement started, selection of genotype for cultivation, people have used extensive phenotyping, that is see if with less input or with less care, what genotype can give better product and the nutritious product. And then later, the systematic breeding started when the assembly of desired phenotype. That is, earlier breeding was mainly based on the phenotype. The plant breeder used his intelligence to select the parents, and then he made crosses, and then he selected for the plant phenotype that is which can yield better or which have better stress tolerance in a given environment. Then the molecular technologies came in. Once the genomics technologies were available, we knew about the genomes, and then we know that the genes control the phenotype. So people started establishing the phenotype genotype relationship. That is, if a plant height is there, and if we mutate the SD1 gene, we will get dwarf phenotype. Like that, they started establishing relations between the phenotype genotype. That is, once you know the relationship, then the impact is tremendous. That is, for example, the green revolution genes, SD1 in rice, RHD gene in wheat, they were linked to the shorter phenotype and non-lodging and the input responsive. So once they established a phenotype genotype relationship, once you know what is the genomic region that contribute to the yield, then it is easy to introgress that genomic location in the different genotype for different environmental background, and you can improve the yield at faster rate. So that is the phenotype. Hence, the phenotype genotype relationship is very critical for plant breeding and enhance the phase of plant breeding. That is, if you want to make quick progress, this relationship is very essential. So this is now widely used. At least we know several genes in important food crops, and it is being introgressed in the crop plants. Now the genomics selection came in, so wherein the next generation genotyping technology plus high throughput phenotypic technologies are used, and their training population is phenotyped and genotyped to estimate genome estimated breeding values. That is, the whole genome is given some weightage, that is how much contribution it is making to the yield, and based on this the selection is done in the breeding population. So this is gaining very important aspect. Besides the crop improvement, the phenotyping is also very key for the precision agriculture and post-harvest technology. So that aspects we will not discuss today. So when we say phenotype, all of you must be remembering this equation. Phenotype is genotype into environment interaction, which gives rise to phenotype. So if you want to establish a phenotype genotype relationship, it is very critical to measure the phenotype, the environment, so that we can measure the phenotype precisely. So why the phenotyping is necessary, that is phenomics technologies are necessary, why we have to take the phenotype data extensively, why not just we use the yield? So there is no harm in using the yield. Only thing is that we will not know the reason, so we will not be able to use the trait and enhance the phase of genetic gain. The gain will be very slow. So for example, if we know for example, biomass. So biomass is the critical component. So if you do an endpoint phenotype, that is at the end of the crop cycle, we harvest the plant, and if we measure the biomass, maybe all these three genotypes here in this graph which I have given, they may have the same biomass. So we will not know, we think that there is no genetic variation, we will use any one of the genotype in our breeding purpose. But if we measure the rate of biomass accumulation or biomass accumulation at different phenological phases, you will know one genotype, it has an early vigor and it starts very early, whereas other genotype, it has high growth rate at later phase. So instead of using any one of the genotype, if we combine the genotype which has early vigor as well as the genotype which can accumulate high biomass at the latter phase of the plant, then you will combine, you will produce a genotype which can have far higher the biomass. Yield is governed by several genes. So this is an example. So in each genotype, the yield may be because of some genes. It is not necessarily all the genes for the yield is high in any genotype. So that's why if you identify the component traits in different genotypes, we can assemble the trait to produce a better genotype. So in that case, we need phenomic technologies that can collect deep phenotyping data throughout the crop growth period. The conventional approach, it is very time consuming. That is, even for taking the weight of the plant, that is, if you have planted 300, 400 mapping population or germplasm, and if you want to know at 30 days or 40 days which genotype has accumulated higher biomass, then you have to harvest the plant, weighing, drying. It takes a lot of time and resources. So people are not able to do it. And if you want to know some of the chemical content, for example, the nitrogen content, which is an important macronutrient used by the plant, and we use a lot of nitrogen, and the nitrogen is efficiency is only 40%. So we also waste a lot of nitrogen which goes into environment. So if you want to know which genotype can take up nitrogen quickly and which the nitrogen loss is less, then we have to do estimation of nitrogen in the plant tissue. Then it will take even more time. That is, you collect the plant, dry it, and then do digestion and weigh it. So if we can do it instantly, that is without cutting the plant, without destroying, if we can do it, then definitely it will reduce the labor cost and time, and so that we can move forward. So the conventional method of phenotyping limited the establishment of genotype-phenotype relationship, and that resulted in genotype-phenotype gap. So to address the genotype-phenotype gap, the new technologies are essential. So this is one of the important slides which we have to remember. So we are talking about the phenome or phenotype. Although the G is constant, that is for a given genotype, the genome is constant, but the genome continuously interacting with the environment and it gives rise to various omes, that is either epigenome or transcriptome, proteome, metabolome, ionome. So many omes are coming from the genome, which are highly dynamic. That is, it can vary from this hour to next hour. It can vary from one tissue to other tissue, even though the genome is constant. So all these omes are interacting with the environment continuously. So the dynamic phenotyping is very important to understand the phenome-genome relationship. So that's why it is Robert Tuberosa, one of the eminent molecular breeder. He wrote in his article that phenotyping is king, heritability is queen. So you need a good phenotyping and good heritability of traits so that you can improve the crop at faster rate. So we know how the genome terminology came in. So it came from the genes and womb, it combined and they made a terminology called genome. The genomics terminology, these came from many of the omics terminology, they came from the human genome sequencing project when it started. Similarly, the phenome terminology also came in from the human genome sequencing project. So in 1997, the phenome terminology was coined. Phenome refers to the phenotype as a whole or full set of phenotype of an individual. So phenomics is a systematic study of phenotypes on a genome-wide scale. So the phenotype includes everything. It is very difficult to comprehend. For example, in human being, if we say phenotype, it is manifold, that is from molecule to mind. So in case of plants also, it is many things from the ion, metabolite, morphological structure, plant processes, and many things contribute to the phenotype. So we may not be able to, unlike genotype where you can decipher the genotype information 100%. At present, the technologies are limited, so we may not be able to decipher the phenotype information to that extent, but we can do a large extent of phenotype. So all this phenomics technology, that is organism-wide phenotype collection, it depends upon the use of high throughput, non-destructive and computer vision aided phenotype. So these kind of phenotyping technologies are the imaging sensors which we used in the phenomics operates in three broad principles. So instead of explaining in each sensor how it works, just I put a one slide. So in this case, some kind of sensors are available. So for example, either the visual camera which we use, or we use the multispectral camera, or we use the hyperspectral camera. All these camera, they work on the simple principle that either when the solar radiation or artificial light source, when it falls on the plant, so depending upon the physical structure as well as the chemical composition, some light is absorbed, some is transmitted, and some is reflected. So if we measure mostly the reflected light, from that we infer the phenotype. The other kind of sensor, that is the thermal sensor, they mainly measure the radiation emission. That is each object above the absolute temperature, they emit radiation. And if we measure the radiation, we can measure the temperature of the object. The third kind of sensor which is commonly used is the laser scanner or laser imaging detection and ranging. So wherein the laser light is emitted from a source and it falls on the object and the light is reflected back. So the time travel for taken for the travel of laser light is measured. Based on that, the plant height and 3D mapping of an object is done. So most commonly used sensors are the visual sensor, that is normal camera which we use, which measures the reflectance from 400 to 700 nanometer. And the near infrared cameras are used, which measures the reflectance from 700 to 1700 nanometer. So the visual camera measures the reflectance in 3 bands, that is red, green, and blue. The near infrared camera, it measures the reflectance in 1 band, that is one data it gives for the reflectance from 700 to 1700 nanometer. The hyperspectral cameras are sensors are very useful. So they measure reflectance from 400 to 2500 nanometer. For each nanometer, you give the get the reflectance. So this gives a lot of data to understand the deep phenotype of the plant. Infrared thermal sensors are used to measure the plant temperature, and chlorophyll fluorescence sensors are available, which can do high throughput chlorophyll fluorescence measurement. So these sensors, it can be placed either in the controlled environment, that is, you can place the cameras in imaging chamber, and then the plants can move into the chamber like X-ray scan or CT scan. The system is there, and we are going inside the scanner, and the data is collected. So in this case also, the cameras are placed in a chamber, and the plants move in, and the data is taken back, and the plants again later it is moved to the greenhouse. And these sensor can also be placed in a field platform, that is, if you want to grow the plant in the soil and you make the data, you can have a fixed structure, and the cameras can be placed in the structure, and the cameras can move in X, Y, Z direction, and it can take the images. Or these cameras can be loaded on the drones, and the data can be taken very quickly. So towards this, ICR has established the phenomics facilities in 4 different institutes. One is at CREDA, Hyderabad. That was the one first established. And the second one was established in Nyashram, Baramati. And the third one is established in IIHR, Bangalore. And the fourth one, which is this facility, that is Nanaji Deshmukh Plant Phenomics Center, which was established in IRI at 2017. So this was inaugurated by Honorable Prime Minister in October 2017. So I'll briefly show you how the whole system works, and then we can move to the how each sensor work and what kind of data we get. So you can see a brief video how this system works.
जलवायु परिवर्तन फसलों की उत्पादकता के लिए एक ज्वलंत समस्या है। भारतीय खाद्य सुरक्षा को बनाए रखने के लिए जलवायु अनुकूल फसल किस्में विकसित करना आवश्यक है। इस लक्ष्य की प्राप्ति के लिए भारतीय कृषि अनुसंधान संस्थान ने एक अत्याधुनिक एवं स्वचालित प्लांट फिनोमिक्स केंद्र की स्थापना की है। फिनोमिक्स एक आधुनिक बहुविषयक विज्ञान है, जिसमें लगभग वास्तविक समय में पौधों को
So the plants grown in the greenhouse, it moves to the imaging station, where it is lifted and rotated. So image is taken from the top and from all the side angles, and based on that we collect the information. And also it precisely quantify how much water the plant use, and we can add the exact amount of water to the plant.
पद्म विभूषण से सम्मानित स्वर्गीय श्री चंद्रिका दास अमृतराव देशमुख, जो एक महान सामाजिक कार्यकर्ता रहे हैं, उनके सम्मान में आज इस केंद्र को भारत के माननीय प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के द्वारा नानाजी देशमुख प्लांट फिनोमिक्स केंद्र के नाम से राष्ट्र को समर्पित किया जा रहा है।
extremely happy to be here today to see this wonderful facility. I think when I was young and student, we had so much trouble in recording accurate data.
I don't know whether the audio is visible or not. I doubt whether it is visible. So Professor Swaminathan has also visited the facility after inauguration. He expressed his happiness, and he's saying that this is very important technology that has to be used in the breeding program.
Who wanted the best in science to go to the poorest of the poor, the villages?
So we also use these sensors in the drone, and we take images in the field. Like this is the rice field where you put the sensors in the drone, and we can cover imaging of about 1 hectare land within 15 minutes. So in the main facility, we have the climate controlled greenhouse where the plants are grown on the cars, and which can move within the greenhouse for various purpose, and then it can be daily monitored for its water use. And these are the various kind of sensors which I have explained. So once a plant goes inside the phenomics, the imaging chambers, about 741 different images are taken. So the data analytics is a huge challenge. Besides that, we also record all the environmental data, that is temperature, carbon dioxide, relative humidity, light. So this we can record every 5 minutes. It is automatically recorded. So in general, the data analysis, I will not go into the deep, but it involves the few major steps. Once you get the raw image, the pre-processing tools are used to enhance the image so that it is more focused, and then the image segmentation technologies are used to separate the background from the plant. That is, all the backgrounds are removed, only the plant image is kept. Then the feature extraction from the image, whether it is a chlorophyll content or biomass, various kind of feature extraction, and then few classification, whether it is having less chlorophyll, more chlorophyll, or less RWC, more RWC. Those kind of classification can be done by using the classification, wherein the machine learning tools are used. So these are some of the algorithms which are used in the facility. So I'll briefly cover various the cameras and what kind of data it gives. So the visual camera, which is the most widely used camera in the drone as well as in the controlled environment phenotyping platform. So it can give, once the, as I told, it gives information in red, green, and blue. So once you get the information, this information can be classified into various bins by using labs color space analysis, and then you can get the information about the biomass, chlorophyll content, senescence, leaf area duration, and several other parameters it gives. So it gives about 240 different phenotypic characters it gives for each image. So we also do a verification, that is, we take image and we count the pixel number. We also see what is the correlation with the actual measurement. So this is the actual leaf area measurement by using the conventional leaf area meter, and we can see a very good relationship between these two. And similarly, we can predict the chlorophyll content. So we need not do extraction and measurement, which takes a lot of time and labor. So we can easily predict the chlorophyll content. We can also count how many panicles or earheads are there in the plants. And then, as I told, it gives large number of imaging trait. It can it gives these traits, whether it is having heritability or not. That is very important. and what is the correlation of this imaging trait with the ultimate yield is also important. So in each phenological stage, these are the different phenological stage, and these are the number of traits that have very good correlation with the yield, and this is the average heritability and the heritability of the repeatability of the heritability. So each we have identified several image-based traits that have very high correlation, and it is also important to note that these heritability of these traits vary from phase to phase, which means that some genomic region is important at one stage, whereas the other region is important at other stage. So throughout the crop growth, we can monitor various plant parameters. And the second kind of sensor is near infrared sensor, which measures the relative water content as the reflectance of the NIR radiation at waveband 1500 and 2000 is highly influenced by waters. That is, water absorbs these wavelength radiation. So in that range, the reflectance is less. So based on that, we can measure the relative water content, which is very important parameter of the plant health. That is, we know the plant is not under stress, which is very difficult to measure with the conventional method. It takes a lot of time. So besides that, we can also quantify various other biochemical parameters by using the hyperspectral camera, which measures reflectance from 350 nanometer to 2400 nanometer. You can see for each wavelength, you get the reflectance pattern. And this is the variation which you see for different RWC. If you make the spectral reflectance, you get very clear reflectance. And also by using this sensor, it is very difficult, very easy to measure various pigments, like either chlorophyll or carotenoid, anthocyanins. If they measure, absorb the radiation at specific wavelength, those can be measured very easily. So by using this, we have developed methods for measurement of relative water content, plant stress level, and this is the sugar level prediction. And also for the nitrogen content, wherein you can see the whole plant nitrogen distribution. This is under the control condition. This is under the nitrogen stress condition. So some genotypes, like for example, the Carcia, it has high green area under stress condition, whereas this genotype has less green area under the nitrogen deficient condition. So you can see how the nitrogen deficiency is distributed, and you can also quantify this. Besides this, you can also quantify various other nutrients without destroying. That is, once you make a model, develop a model, and based on this model, you can predict various other micronutrient. You can also map the protein content. So this is the protein content mapped in the single wheat kernel. So you can measure how much total protein content is there and how it is distributed in the different grains. And these information can be used for the QTL mapping or GWAS studies. We can also distribute discriminates the genotype. That is, if you have a large number of genotype, and based on the spectral signature, the genotypes can be distributed. So the chlorophyll fluorescence imaging is another important tool. It measures the efficiency of the photosystem to electron transfer. So in this case, we can easily take an image and then measure quickly what is the chlorophyll fluorescence in the control, or if you are giving different treatment, drought or any other treatment, you can measure the chlorophyll fluorescence. The another important sensor is thermal camera, which is used to measure the tissue temperature. Tissue temperature is very important indicator of stomatal conductance and photosynthesis and also stress. So the thermal image has very high correlation with the tissue temperature. So if we measure the thermal image, we can get the tissue temperature. The important thing is that you can also get what is the temperature of the panicle versus the flag leaf versus the other leaf. So you can see a lot of variation within the plant. The tissue temperature varies. So this kind of information can be obtained. And if you take drone image, you can classify the drone image. This is a biomass map. So you can see for each plot what is the biomass accumulation. So you can see that in the nitrogen deficient plant, the biomass accumulation is towards lower end, whereas in the like control plant, it is mostly in this range. whereas in the drought condition, it is less than the control, but more than the nitrogen deficiency plot. So you can quickly assess various parameters. The final important one parameter is water use efficiency, which is very difficult to measure under the field condition. So some of you might have measured the water use efficiency by using the gravimetric method. So in this, you have to measure the part weight, and then you have to measure the transpiration. So which can be easily done in the phenomics facility by measuring the irrigation water level daily. And also you measure the plant biomass. So you exactly calculate how much amount of water is used per day for plant. So we have collected some important studies wherein we have showed that the transpiration in general, we assume that most of the water is used in the daytime, but in our study in rice with almost about 600 genotype, we have shown that in the nighttime also large amount of water is used. So this is the nighttime transpiration and this is the daytime transpiration. So you can see about almost about on an average about 20% of the water which is used in the nighttime, which is huge amount of water. So we could find a lot of variation in the genotype. And we have also used the GWAS approaches as well as the QTL biparental mapping approaches to map the QTLs for water use efficiency. So similarly, we have done it for wheat. So that is in brief that how we can use various sensor for measuring various image-based traits for crop improvement. So future phenotyping fields may look like this. That is, you may have a lot of UAVs and the phenotyping system in the field automatically transmitting the data to your computer system. So from the lab, you can collect the phenotype at various stages, and then you can get extensive phenotypic data which can be used for the plant breeding. So the phenomics, it will be very useful for rate reduction and identification of donors, and for mapping QTLs and genes for component trait, and phenome genome crop models for trait prediction and idiotype design. Similar to genomic selection, and phenomic selection can be done, and phenomic assisted recurrent selection can also be done. Phenome-wide association studies are also being done in animal sciences, but it can be also applied in the plant sciences. So now the important thing in this technologies are that besides the biological scientists, we need to work in collaboration with computational scientists, statistical scientists, and bioinformatician, so that the huge amount of data which is collected can be analyzed and we can take out the meaningful information. So just this is last but one slide. It is very important to ask the relevant question, whatever technology you are using. So it is the question that gets you the Nobel Prize. After that, you just add lab coats, coffee, and air conditioning. So whatever experiment you do, it is very important to ask relevant questions so you get a relevant answer. So finally, I thank the National Agriculture Science Fund, ICAR, for providing the fund for establishment of this facility, and also large number of scientists, they are associated with this project, starting from our Director General ICAR, Dr. Trilochan Mahapatra, who started the phenomics effort in the country to establish this phenomic science. And then many of our colleagues, they are daily working in our phenomics facility. They take care of all the data capture, like Dr. Sudhir Dandapani, Dr. Sahu from agriculture physics, Dr. Hari Krishna, Dr. Ranjit, and Dr. Gopal Krishnan from genetics. They do all kind of analysis. Finally, I thank Annamalai University and Professor Prakash for giving me an opportunity to speak with all of you. And the last message is water is very precious. So one who solves the problem of water is worth 2 Nobel Prizes, one for science and one for peace. So we all have to work to conserve water. The fresh water is a very scarce resource, so we should use water judiciously. And agriculture is one of the major consumer of water, so we have to improve the water use efficiency of the plant, as well as we have to use water management technology for judicious use of water. So thank you one and all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I invite Dr. Bhagiradan from Sri Lanka to continue his lecture.
Good morning, sir. Can you hear my voice? Hello? Can you hear my voice or?
So you're clear, sir.
It's great. Okay. So,
Now I
good morning,
invite,
everybody.
okay, sir, you continue. No place.
So, good morning, everybody. So, this is an opportunity given by Annamalai University, Professor Prakash, who arranged for this guest lecture. I would like to, first of all, thank to Dr. Manivannan, Professor Manivannan, for the Dean, Faculty of Agriculture, Annamalai University, and the distinguished scholars who participated, and the students and my dear colleagues. So, today's lecture, I would like to talk the crop improvement and plant protection in the genomics era, the recent advances and the future directions. So I would like to introduce my topic with the plant breeding. You all know the plant breeding is a deliberate effort of the human to change the trait of the plant desired to the benefits of the human. The person who is working as a professional in plant breeding, we call it as the plant breeders. So now in the modern society, the plant breeding and improvement are considered as a synonyms. Why we need to breed plants? So our ultimate target of the plant breeding is to improve the yield and improve the quality and increase the resistance to the plant to biotic and abiotic stresses. So breeding can classify into two major groups. One is the conventional approach, is an earlier breeding, to traditional method from the selection of the germplasm until the release of the varieties. We call it as a conventional breeding approach. This conventional breeding approach is not giving the prominent results. Therefore, try to move the unconventional breeding. The unconventional breeding is the use of cutting edge technology, especially the next generation technologies, to improve the crop within a short time. Why we need to move towards the modern breeding? You all know in 2050, we are projected, it has been projected that the population will be in 10 billion, meaning 25% higher than this year. So the current yield of major crops, wheat and rice and maize, are not sufficient to meet the demand of these 10 billion. Other than that, so yield also lost. So due to the higher pressure of the pest and disease attack, as well as the climates. So therefore, So to increase the attainable yield towards the achievable yield, so we have to improve our crops through the modern plant breeding. So as expected in the crop losses, nearly about 36.5%, according to the FAO says, nearly 40% of the crop is lost. And if you are taking an India, so nearly 18% of the crop is being lost to the pest and diseases. So therefore, the first generation unconventional, the modern breeding started with the molecular markers. You all know the molecular markers are the genetic losses, so can be simply and quantified in the population and the correlated with the desired trait. So according to that advancement of the molecular markers, there are so many molecular markers so have identified, but this is the genotyping pipeline of these molecular markers. So the molecular markers even used nowadays in the modern breeding too, with the various applications for the detection of the desired trait, characterization of the gene, and the QTL identification, QTL mapping, and gene marker-assisted breeding and gene predicting for the various aspects. These molecular markers still being used. But the problem is the earlier developed markers are, so development of the new markers and the characterization of the new markers and validation of the new markers took long time and time consuming and cost. So therefore, the scientists and the researchers were thinking that to put on continuous effort to develop the markers that are reliable and abundant, almost evenly distributed throughout the genome, that will be helpful for the upgrading of our breeding technologies towards achieving the highest yield. So through that, the Human Genome Project, this with the next generation sequencing, they identified the single nucleotide polymorphism we call as SNPs. It's a minimum variations you can find in any organisms. With these NGS platforms and parallelly developed high throughput genotyping platforms, genotype SNP scoring and genotyping platform, for example, from the starting with the Golden Gate genome technology to highly advanced competitive allele specific PCR, they have developed certain technologies with the help of NGS platforms. They identified so many SNPs. These SNPs has been mapped, and nowadays very high dense SNP maps are available for our future breedings. This genomics era, so before we going to the genomics era breeding, we have to know something about the genomics. The genomic is the field of genetics, an attempt to understand the content, the organization, function, and evolution of the genetic information contained in the whole genome of a particular organism. If you are not very clear about this particular gene sequences, present of the gene, exact location of the genes, you can easily trace the desirable trait and you can manipulate that trait very quickly. So this genomics, you can classify it into three major categories: structural genomics and comparative genomics and functional genomics. So our target is to identify the gene function. You all know the many genes has been identified, but the exact function of the genes, nearly about 40 to 60% of the non-genes are not known. So therefore, the functional identification, the functions of the gene is very important too for the genomic selection of the crops. The functional genomics is giving the development application of global wide or the system wide experimental approach to access the function of gene by making the use of information reagent provided by the structural genomics. It is a characteristic, it characterizes the function of the sequence elucidated by structural genomes. Functional genomes, they have this lot of applications. From these functional applications, nowadays we can analyze the gene, we can analyze the proteins and metabolites analysis, sugar analysis through the one of the protogenomic or the genomics or metabologenomics, and glycomics. These are the functional genomics applications that will be used for the future genomic. This functional genomics and the exact location, I has already explained that exact location and the exact sequence is the first step of the genomic breeding for the crop improvement. The functional genomic is an general approach toward understanding of the gene, how it is working in the organism. That so this is, we call it as a trait of an organism. So evolution of this molecular breeding towards the next generation breeding. In the next generation breeding, so you all know the invention, right? The invention of the next generation platforms, it's opened a new era for the next generation plant breeding. So high throughput sequencing of the DNA and the whole genome sequence data available, it given and many applications in plant genetics and genomics. For example, if you are taking the genomic selection of the genomic resources and complete decoding of the species genome, and differential gene expression studies and whole genome association studies and genomics assisted breeding. These are some application of these genomic breedings. Other than the genomic applications, these genomics, next generation genomic sequences and sequencing information proved a new plant breeding methodologies. For example, association mapping and mark-assisted selection and breeding by design and gene breeding and genomic selections. These are the new breeding methods nowadays followed by the breeders using this genomic breed. So genomic approaches also given the many tools for nowadays to breeders, especially large collection of the molecular markers and genome and transcriptome sequencings, and in coupled with the bioinformatics informations and high density genetic maps, new experimental population, complete gene catalog of many crop species and their functions. These all genomic tools and resources have been established well with the next generation platforms, with parallelly to discover the more molecular markers that are very well linked with a particular traits. Parallelly, they developed new marker discovery techniques also use this in the genomics breeding. So these sequence data, right? These sequence data generated by the whole genome sequencing or genotyping by sequencing have been deposited in many databases. These deposited databases can publicly accessible. So if the breeder want to get any information, sequence information of the particular crop, for example, the rice, or for example, if the wheat, if they are tapping these website, one of these websites, they can get the sequence data, for example, NCBI. So for you want to get the marker data or the rust sequence data or microorganism sequence data, quickly you can get it. So this is through the next generation platforms, these all information has been deposited in these data banks. This is accessible for the modern breeding. So these are some of these databases available and you can access these needs. So in the genomics era, there are 5 Gs very important for the crop improvement. First one, we will see one by one. First one is the genome. In the genome, right, the advances, as I mentioned earlier, the first G mentioned that the genome assembly. The next generation sequencing technologies coupled with the genome assembly algorithm have de novo assemblies, right? So with the reference genome or without reference genomes, more than 260 plant genomes have been sequenced. These sequences are available publicly. Some are restricted to use, some can use by the others. For example, the important crops, wheat and the rice and the maize. So full genome is now characterized and full genomes has been sequenced on the highly dense SNP maps, single nucleotide polymorphism maps are available for the next breeding. And the recent advancement of the long read generations and the physical map linkages also helpful for the genome assembly of these your targeted crops. So genome assembly information is highly helpful for the developing the gene expression atlas and proteome maps and metabolome maps and epigenome maps. From these epigenomes and protogenomes or all other maps, the early selection of these cultivars, early selection of these genomics, early level genomic selection is highly facilitated by these genomes. So with an ongoing deep reduction and resequencing projects, so if once the whole genome is sequenced, the sequenced one may not be giving an accurate data, accurate sequence data, accurate gene location. So there nowadays with the advanced platforms and the high reduction with the reduction cost, large scale resequencing project has been initiated. Through that, more than 3,000 wheat germplasm, more than 1,050 rice germplasms, and 500 chickpea germplasm had been resequenced. This resequenced one giving an accurate information than the earlier sequenced one. So this exact sequence or with the reference genomes, so this is very helpful for the genome assembly. With this, to help this genome assembly, they developed that the platforms because the whole genome sequencing developed the big data to handling and facilitating the easy handling of this data. They have initiated the platforms we call it as an SNP6, genomic open source breeding informations, excellence in breeding platforms. So this is become available to now breeders or the scientists, so they can easily mine the new alleles or allele. For they can check with their germplasm with the desired traits. So nowadays you can get, so this is some information about the whole genome data of some crops. For example, if you are taking the genome size of wheat, because it's a hexaploid, so genome size of the wheat compare with that the maize or the bean or the rice. So genome size of the hexaploid is very high. So therefore this whole fully sequenced genome assembly is very helpful to targeted, to get the targeted sequence of the desired traits. With this helpful, the genome size and the physical distances and genetics distances will helpful for advanced breedings. So other than that, so with the bioinformatics tools coupled, so genomics model have been proposed with these different crops. With these different crops, so nowadays there's so much of SNP markers are available. If you want to tightly go closer to your trait, or if you want to clone your traits, so you can use this one of these markers and the sequence data for even selection of these your crops. So with parallel to the crop genomes, so pathogen genomes also being sequenced. See, pathogen genome sequencing also helpful for how the gene of the crop and the microbes evolve. So these evolutionary studies will helpful to the exact or the targeted discovery of the different pathotypes or the different strains of the pathogens. Therefore, you can easily screen your germplasm with resistant to the particular pathotypes. The second gene is a genetic characterization. Genetic characterization is very, very important because in the Green Revolution, so when from the domestication to the Green Revolutions, so we have missed so much of valuable germplasm, so valuable traits. So now the problem is that our gene pool is consisting of narrowed diversity of alleles. So therefore, the conserved germplasm in the national and international gene banks, if you are going to tap that germplasm, so you can come across with many new traits. For example, if you are taking more than 1,700 worldwide germplasm banks are available with the 7.4 million accessions. Among the 7.4 million accession, only less than 2% of this material has been characterized. So this characterization, only 2% mean nearly 2,000, nearly 20,000 germplasm have been characterized. So with the advanced phenomic data, advanced phenomics, and the genomics, if we are characterizing the more and more germplasms, so we can widen our genome pool. So the NVS approaches, right, but the whole genome resequencing project, so they have now characterized more than 3,010 rice accessions by genotyping, by sequencing, more than 20,000 wild breed species and 44,624 weed species and the barley species have been characterized. With this characterized, for example, if you are going there in the Australia, so the Watkins collections, the people who are now characterizing the Watkins collection for the grain quality and the resistant to rust diseases. The continuous characterization of the germplasm, so we can identify these new traits and we can introduce this new trait with this advanced next generation technology into our modern germplasms. So this next generation sequencing technology have been implemented, and many crops, for example, rice and foxtail millets and pigeon pea and pearl millet, cotton, rapeseed and chickpea and grapes. So they have now the checking for the marker trait associations. If the marker trait association is giving a prominent answer, mean your marker is very tightly, then you can use for the characterizations. You can use for the modern crop breeding. And development of the mapping population is another task. So for the characterization, if you want to characterize your germplasm, so you can use for the national international screening nurseries, right? National international screening nurseries for the drought resistance or rust resistance or any pathogen resistance or the yield improvement or the water deficient areas, or for the drought resistant clones, you can screen. For that screening purposes, you have to develop the way. Once you have screened, if you are having that, if you are thinking that your germplasm is consisting of the traits, then you have to develop the mapping populations. From the mapping population only you can identify the target gene. So there are so many mapping populations are nowadays available, from the haploid population to the recombinant inbred lines to neo-isogenic lines, or even the chromosome segment substitution, then so much populations. How you can genotype and the phenotype your germplasms if you are thinking that your germplasm is consisting of the resistant character. So this is an pipeline is showing that how you can develop the recombinant inbred lines. So you construct contrasting phenotypic parents should cross. Once you have crossed from the F1, you have to screen in the field from the F1, and you will derive the F2 plants. From the F2 plants, so single seed harvest and single head descent method is commonly used in the advanced breeding to get the homozygosity in the F8 and F9. These recombinant inbred lines, right? If the recombinant inbred lines is easily, you can isolate that. If you are thinking that if your germplasm is consisting of desirable traits. Another technique is used for the next generation crop breeding using the mutation map. So this is mutation mapping means, so your germplasm, you have to mutate it, and the mutation, the mutant one is crossed with the parent, right? As like I earlier explained that repopulation development. So in the F2, they are screening, right? From the screening through the whole genome sequencing techniques, so you can easily target the variation found in the mutant populations. So this is one of the how you can phenotype your real population for the disease resistance. So real population, you can even if you are thinking that is a qualitative trait or the quantitative trait, if you are not known, if you are you are thinking that your target is the qualitative trait screening, you can do that one with the well-developed pathotypes in the greenhouses easily, right? So this is an example for the rust screening in the wheat. So for greenhouse test for that the two leaf stages, you have to inoculate it with the specific pathotypes and you have to score it. And you have to go for a statistical analysis with the control and the neo-isogenic lines if there is a desired trait is present or not. Or if you are thinking that is a quantitative character, you can directly go for the field test. So adult plant resistance in the rust, or the gene, if the trait is expressing phenotypically well in the adult plant stages. So you can go for a phenotyping in the field, and then you can go for a statistical analysis, a number of traits you can identify, and whether this if it is a number of traits, mean how much effect is giving the trait and the environment, phenotypic plant and environmental interaction effect also you can calculate by these advanced statistical packages. Once it is phenotyped, then you can go for a genotyping platform as a next generation phenotyping platform. So any way you can go and genotype in which trait you are targeting. If you are, for example, if you are targeting, if your germplasm is consisting of the single gene, right? If your target is single gene, or earlier this whole genome sequence data is published or available, definitely you can go for a. So once you have, you can from the real population after phenotypic evaluation, you can extract the DNA. So normally for the sequencing purposes, or genotype by sequencing, or bulk secretome analysis, or SNP genotyping, or any dart array genotyping by sequencing, anything. So you have to extract the good quality DNA. Commonly we prefer to extract the DNA by using the CTEP method. Once the DNA is extracted and the quantified, then you can send it. If you don't have the facilities, then you can send it the sequencing labs, right? So the DNAs, no need to send the materials, you can send the DNA to the sequencing labs. Then from the sequencing, high automated, high throughput technologies, they will check your germplasm with their reference genomes. So then they will send the data, so the markers that are showing linkage with these chromosomes. If it is a whole genome sequencing, so higher number of markers will come. If it is selective genotyping, mean you will get the few markers where it is showing higher linkage, in which chromosome it's showing the higher linkages. Then you can design, if you're having the sequence, they will send the sequence data, then you can easily design the markers based on this reference sequencing by using the marker development software. So Primer 3D or different softwares, then you can map your genes. If it is a single showing single association, single chromosome association, so you can map it and you can check with the reference consensus map published or SNP maps where it is located, whether the markers is showing the tight linkage or not, right? And if it is a SNPs, you can for the Casper assay, or if the markers are the SSR or STS, then you can for a normal PCR and gel electrophoresis method, then you can think that whether this is one is a single qualitative trait or the quantitative trait. If it is a quantitative trait, a qualitative trait, then you can use for these softwares, different softwares to map your genes or map your QTLs. Right? These are softwares are available, publicly available and easily used by you. And this is for the QTL mapping softwares. Then the third G is the gene function identifications. Right? You have now the you have now the well characterized germplasm. If the reference genomes are available, or from these reference genomes, if already function identified assemblies are there, then definitely you can easily identify the gene functions and it is exact locations. Or if not, then it will be new, then you have to go closer for the gene identifications. For this, various omic platforms were established in the past, and from the functional characterization of the more than 296 genes of the rice have been functionally characterized. So now if you are going there in these gene banks, rice banks, then definitely if your target is there, then definitely you can identify the function. If the function is known, then you can easily, initially you can select for the breeding purposes, right? Breeding purposes, and you can use this functional genes as a candidate for the cloning purposes. With the system, advancing the system biology, right? Advancing of the system biology, nowadays it's giving more and more identification of the gene function through genomics and transcriptomics and epigenomics and proteomics. So through this, you can easily identify your gene functions, and through that one also you can develop the gene expression atlas and epigenome maps and proteome maps. These maps will be used by the followers. So next is a genomic breeding. It's now characterized. Then what breeding or what technique you are going to use for the genomic breeding. So our target is to get the germplasm with a high yield very short period. So therefore, there are new breeding approach which has been proposed and identified and practiced by the many yield improvement laboratories by the scientists. So there are new approaches in the genomic breeding of forward breeding. The forward breeding and haplotype based breeding and genomic selection and spread breeding, there has been so new approaches nowadays it has been used. So in the genomic breeding approaches extensively used to develop the large number of breeding lines for commercial release. So the forward breeding is, if you are thinking that you are going to follow the forward breeding approaches from the F2 generation, you can easily advance the carrying target QTL or target gene, you can easily identify. Or if the marker assisted recurrent selection you are going to practice, then you can intercross more than 10 to 40 locus into your elite germplasm parallelly. Then haplotype assembly. This is a new approach in the genomic breeding through the assembling the superior haplotypes of the target traits. If the superior haplotypes of the target trait is known, then it will be omit many confusions for the haplotype assisted breedings. So this is one of the rapid gene stacking technology proposed recently. So this, if you want to stack for more than 4 genes for the resistance or quality and for other characters, if you're having the more of the genes nowadays, how you can easily to reduce the number of generation, how you can easily stack by the spread breeding. This is a pipeline. It's showing that how you are going to multi-quality genes into the one germplasm for quick release of these elite varieties. So this is another breeding strategies, the spread breeding, right? So how the traditional breeding, it take more than 10 to 14 years. By through the development of the double haploid population, it's reduced, but the spread breeding is further reduced into 2-3 years. Even you can develop the well allied germplasm because of these availability of bioinformatics resources and the next generation sequencing platforms and the well equipped, well modified greenhouses and well advanced proteomes. So this phenomics and the genomics is advanced. Now this interaction of these many methods and coupling of these many methods, easily you can develop your elite cultivar in short period of time. So this is then how you can easily for the supercharging plant growth by optimally giving the nutrition, photoperiod, and other requirement in the modified environment. So therefore, you can shorten the generation advancement. If you are shortening the generation advancement, then quickly you can evaluate the varieties and you can release the varieties for upgrade, for satisfy the demand of the food for increasing the populations. So last G is a genome editing. It's a current trend of these advanced breeding is genome editing. So genome editing means you are going to edit the desired germplasms to get or modify the desired traits by modifying the sequence through the silencing or promoting or repairing the genome of these of your desired germplasms. Nowadays, the Cas9, so induced genome editing is being popular through that so many varieties have been developed and giving the highly resistant to even drought and highly resistant to many diseases. And express edit approach in by nowadays in express edit is another advancement of the gene editing method. So this in this one for Cas9, so nowadays not inserting the Cas9 genes for modifications or targeted editing. Nowadays sgRNA is preying on the plants, and so this then you are evaluating that plant whether it is a gene is desiredly edited or not. So this is reducing the time for genome editing compared to the genome traditional genome editing. So through the genome editing, nowadays they have modified the sequence of this genome of the plant by editing method. These methods nowadays are showing the resistance to diseases, especially seed blight, Xanthomonas blight in the rice, and 1 or 2 rust diseases, and Fusarium head blights through these genome editing softwares. So they have edited their germplasms. Nowadays, these germplasms are showing the resistance because the germplasm is not carrying any resistant genes. What is our ultimate target is you have to edit or near it. Otherwise, you can modify to their genomes. So 3 more examples other than this disease resistance, right? So to nowadays it has been success of the through the genome editing. One of these big example is the gluten-free because glutens are allergic to the many people. So therefore the 5 genes are governing the gluten. So therefore they have mutated for edited these 5 of these genes nowadays is giving the gluten-free genes. For gluten-free varieties are nowadays it's being developed in the advanced stage. Another one is the potato, right? In the potato, the value-added chain, the amylopectin is the problem. So they have what they have done is they have silenced these amylopectin producing genes, and nowadays the potatoes are available for public use. So this is an genome editing. Through the genome editing nowadays they have engineered the crops. So this is a genome editing. Many papers, if you want to read for you get the in more information, you can go through that and you can read how this genome editing is going in the advanced genomic business. So from this past, so past with the good memories and present is passing with an unpredictable future. So therefore our target is to how we are going to food or the feed these 10 billion populations. So this is the future direction should be, if you are doing the gene editing, so if you are editing, so people will think that this is a genetically modified organisms. So we have to develop the strategy to address the public that the impact of educate the public to allow the benefit of the research rather than the reluctant to accept these genetically modified organisms. And also, the next one is to genome editing approach, creating the new alleles and promoting of superior alleles and do removal of deleterious effect alleles. In the large sequencing effort, you have to increase the gene editing approach to the next level. Third one is the tapping of more germplasm. So germplasm tapping and more and more and reverse back to the domestic approach will give our gene or genome to the wise diversity. If it is our diversity mean, so we cannot get the more problems of this genomic breeding. And express edit approaches. Nowadays, it has been introduced this express edit. If it is going to the another advanced stage, then the future direction breeding will be very easier. So our target will be achieved very quickly. This is time to thank for the Annamalai University Professor Prakash for giving me an opportunity to deliver this lecture. Thank you very much for all the participants and the listeners. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, students, participants. The questions are open now. If you have any specific questions, we can ask. So when I was going through the chat box, I've got a lot of positive comments. All are appreciating the two speakers, namely Vishwanathan Chinnaswamy sir and Bhagirathan sir. A person by name Babu Devakati. He or she is asking, how do you use this technology in disease mapping? I think this question is to Vishwanathan sir. Okay. So, okay, you can place your questions in the chat box. We will pass it on to the speakers.
Hello.
Yeah, fine.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
So,
Voice is breaking, sir.
Allowed to unmute, so I use the image based, so it is breaking. I think. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Audible.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
So we can use image based technologies for mapping the diseases as well as early mapping the diseases. We have done some work on the rice blast mapping in this context. So in this, hyperspectral imaging is very useful. You can the student can find a lot of references. If they need, they can just mail me at v.chinnasamy@icr.gov.in. I can send the data. So these hyperspectral sensors which collect reflectance in the wide range is widely useful for all the disease mapping. Mainly in we have tried only for rice blast. So other people have used for other diseases as well.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other specific questions? Okay. If there are no other specific questions, it was really nice to have you all in this international webinar. Many more to follow from our department. I would like to thank our university authorities for permitting us to organize this international seminar. Due thanks to our Dean, Dr. Manivanan sir, for his support and constant encouragement for conducting this webinar. I would like to thank the speakers, Dr. Vishwanathan Chinnaswamy sir and Kandaya Bhagirathan. They have spared their valuable time. They are very busy. They have taken the topic in a very nice, lucid, in very so that everyone can understand it in very explainable terms. And lot of these comments are showing your expertise and how they are appreciating your presentation. And without you, both two speakers, sirs, this webinar would be of no purpose. I think it has attained its purpose by looking at the chat window. We'll try to forward these chats to you also, sir,
Thank you.
through mails.
Sure, sure, sure.
Yes, sir. I would like to thank our Dr. Prakash, the organizing secretary, for roping us inside to organize this first international webinar from our department. I would also like to thank Dr. Dhansekharan, Department of Horticulture, for providing us the logistics and support for creating this webinar and all those things. And I would like to thank the patience of the participants. The links were for participation and registration were open for a week, but no one asked for the link till yesterday. And yesterday morning only we sent the links for this Zoom and conferences. So now some have not joined up because there have some internet problems and they were messaging on WhatsApp. We will see what we can do. And suppose we have this recorded material, we can send a link to them so that it will be useful for them inspired, because now we know that internet problems are big issues nowadays. So I hope all the participants will be able to send the link at least. So thanks once again. If I have missed anyone, please forgive. I have not done it intentionally, and I have placed a link as a feedback link along with a password. Please fill in the feedback link. Only then we'll be able to give you certificate. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.